Helen Donovan has an overflowing amount of vivid memories from every stage of her long, fulfilling life, and she has every right to them. Who else, at 94 years old, can say that they were born in a small town in Germany, has lived through wars, survived after being in close contact with a ship that was torpedoed by Russian soldiers, came to America to start a new life with their husband knowing no one, and decided to dedicate nearly their whole lives to volunteering to make a difference in others' lives? Not many, but Helen most certainly can, and she makes sure to. Her whole life she has told the stories of her experiences to her family, especially her two children. She has binders filled with photographs, newspaper clippings, certificates, and awards that she's accumulated throughout her life to tell her stories, but no matter how much you read or look at them, there is nothing like hearing about the experiences from Helen herself. You were born in the small town of Borsendorf, Germany on July 3rd, 1923, and then you moved to Nuremberg when you were 10 years old. So tell me a little bit about what your childhood was like.
Well, Borsendorf is a very small town, and in the town where we lived was no industry for my father and my grandfather. So there was a paper factory in town, and they made the paper for a newspaper in that area. But the paper went bankrupt, and so my father, his father asked him to come to Olbenhau, where there were more opportunities for him to find work. So that's why we moved there in the beginning.
And then at one point in your life, you actually went to the theater with your brother, and you came out and you found that the whole town had been destroyed by bombs. What was that like for you?
That was in Nuremberg, Germany, and we were in an air raid shelter way, way deep down underground, and we heard a lot of rumbling out there. And when it was over, the sirens blew that it's okay. And when we came out, there was nothing left standing of the buildings that were there before we went in. And it was quite scary.
I could imagine. And then while you were living in Germany, you were married to your first husband, who was a German officer who worked at a panzer unit. And with him, you had a son named Peter. And there was a time when you actually had to escape the Russian soldiers with Peter in a baby carriage. And how scary was that for you?
Well, my husband was on the Russian front, was his assignment. And he got killed there. And Peter and I, we lived in the town. And I thought maybe I go get some milk before, because on the radio they said the Russian front has not come near here. So I ventured out up the street to get the milk, and when I came up there, the Russians were marching.
Wow. In 1952, then, when you were 29 years old, you married your husband, Thomas A. Donovan, who was an American soldier, and you decided to move to America with him. Obviously, it was probably very scary for you to have to leave Germany, but was coming to America something that you always wanted to do?
No, but I worked for a lawyer and his family. He was a lawyer at the Nuremberg war trials, and he wanted to bring me back to America as his maid. But meeting my husband canceled that. And then I came with him together on a troop ship, the Alexander Patch. And on the troop ship was a man that was, his family was gravely ill in the States, and they didn't want him to take the long time a boat would take. So they lifted him off the ship with with a little boat. And the little boat went out, and the propeller from that airplane, seaplane, hit the front of that boat. So not only was the little lifeboat disabled to move, and the big boat with the propeller couldn't also. So we had the lifeboat in tow, and we had the big plane in tow, all hanging behind us on the ship. And it took us a lot longer to cross the ocean.
Wow.
And when we came to New York, the local papers had big headlines, "Tragedy at Sea," and they showed pictures and explained what happened. So that was my first getting to America.
And then once you came here and you got settled here, volunteering became a very big part of your life. I have here, you were a member of the Congress One Senior Care for 26 years as their treasurer. You were a member of the Blessed Mother Sodality at St. Anthony Church. You were the secretary at the West Nyack Free Library. And you also did a lot of volunteering at the Nyack Hospital, where you worked for 25 years. And was there anything specific that made you want to get into volunteering when you came here?
Well, my church bulletin suggested that if we have compassionate feelings, we should volunteer at the hospital. So I did. I volunteered like only Mondays. Monday was my day. And they called me because there was a man, he was from a refugee from Germany, and they couldn't speak German, and he couldn't speak English. So they called me in and translated for him. And then whenever they needed somebody, like the reporter for the Journal News, his mother was a patient there, and I had to come and feed her. She couldn't eat. And I usually started to introduce myself that I am a volunteer. And I made it short when I knew the people were hard of hearing. So I just asked her, I said, "Are you Catholic or are you Protestant?" She said, "Oh no, I'm 96 years old. I'm not pregnant."
After all that.
Yeah.
Now, obviously, throughout your whole life, from what you just said and from what I know, you have all these amazing stories and you love to tell them to your children. So is there one story that you would always tell your children growing up that was your favorite one to tell them?
One time at the hospital, I was in the elevator, and Helen Hayes was in there. And I said, "Good morning, Mrs. Hayes." "I'm not Mrs. Hayes. Call me Mrs. MacArthur." And I met a lot of famous people also while at the hospital.
Wow. Well, your kids must have loved to hear about that then.
It was always nice. When my Mondays were over, I had a lot to tell.
I can imagine. I can imagine. Thank you so much for being here with us today. I really appreciate it, and I love hearing all your stories and hearing you talk about everything. They all really, really amaze me, so thank you.
Thank you.